Back in April, when smartphone entrant OnePlus finally took the wraps off of its first phone after months of teasers and hype build-up, we were part of the cheering crowd. After all, what's not to like? We were promised an affordable flagship phone with no compromise specs, and these promises certainly materialized. For example, the 16GB version of the OnePlus One is currently sold for $299 and it packs some pretty amazing hardware. It's got a large 5.5-inch display along with latest generation silicon in the Snapdragon 801. It's also a very capable camera phone, and its large battery ensures industry-leading longevity. But we were also a little hesitant during the hype campaign around the One. Indeed, we knew that the more OnePlus drove expectations up before launch, the bigger the chance that disappointment was inevitable. As it turns out, we were right on the money. That's not to say that the OnePlus One isn't a great device, because it is, especially considering its comfortable price tag. But it's quite obvious to us that the company failed to deliver in the public's eye and in practice. This is to signify the continued issues OnePlus seems to have in terms of supply, and that has left many disappointed. Indeed, currently the OnePlus One can only be bought if you happen to win an invitation from the company to buy one, and that's very far from a sure thing. This being such an appealing device makes this lack of supply all the more terrible to endure. But how appealing is the OnePlus exactly? This is Chris with PhoneArena. Let's take a closer look and find out. Despite OnePlus's denials that Oppo is anything more than a small investor with it, it's quite obvious that the link between the two goes deeper still. This is made obvious by the near identical looks of the One and the Oppo Find 7. Looking at the OnePlus One head-on, we're met with a slightly rounded rectangular piece that is differentiated from the aforementioned device through its display, which is actually protruding from its bed. With the exception of an LED notification light and a front-facing camera located at the top left, and the presence of capacitive navigation buttons, little else of note is to be found up front. Turning the device around, we're met with, in our case, a sandstone black rare shell, which is extremely grippy and quite unique. We've actually never seen anything like this with another phone, and it definitely lives up to its name, as it really reminds of sandstone. In fact, after our initial surprise, we quickly got used to the finish and found that we love the choice of materials here. This one honestly feels unique, but we're definitely worried about the practicality of it. For example, we already somehow managed to chip away at the finish, and the damage is kind of visible. This is despite taking absolutely excellent care of the phone. Moving on, at the sides we have the power key comfortably placed within a thumb's distance on the right side and a volume rocker on the left. Both of these are very well made and protrude just enough to provide proper feedback, but those remain conspicuous. So in terms of overall looks, we're a little conflicted. The nice touch with the rare shell definitely distinguishes the One in the eye of beholders, but at the same time it's not like the lines of the device are something unique. In the era of big screen devices, the 5.5-inch 1080p IPS panel on the OnePlus One is starting to feel standard. Regardless of the large display, the pixel density at 401 pixels per inch ensures a detailed image at all times. In terms of image quality, the display proves true to life, though it's not perfect. For example, color temperature at a little over 7000 kelvins is good but not excellent. This means that the display is slightly colder than it should be, but still better than many rival solutions. Color reproduction is also very good with fairly minimal deviations. For example, color intensities or saturation are correct on the whole, but some, like magenta, have slightly wrong hues for each intensity level. Before we move on, it should be noted that the OnePlus One Cyanogen Mod OS allows you to mess around with color reproduction, and beyond the standard and vivid modes that come by default, you can actually create a custom preset more to your liking. Lastly, in terms of brightness, the One peaks at 447 nits, which we consider good but not excellent. Like the Oppo Find 7a, the One also isn't the best out there when it comes to the viewing experience outside, but you can rest assured that you'd still be able to operate the screen even under direct sunlight. Alongside the One's affordable price tag and interesting pick of materials for its body, the Cyanogen Mod operating system powering the OnePlus One is among its defining points. Looking at this holistically, the OS is a lot about emulating the stock Android feel without diminishing what makes it great, like speed and ease of use. Instead, the Cyanogen Mod team has built on top of it, and in areas they felt need changes. To that end, the software is basically like vanilla Android with a defining layer of customizations perched on top. The UI, for example, is skinned only to an extent, so essential apps only have a new icon, even though they're identical with stock Android on the inside, and you also get a host of new features that you simply can't get with Google's original version. For example, the built-in launcher allows for quite some visual customizations. You can choose between many home screen transition effects, assign specific actions to buttons when on the lock screen, and customize the quick toggles in the notification pull-down menu. There are also a few available status bar customizations, like the ability to show battery percentage and to switch the icon. While still on the topic of looks, the included Themes Showcase app also allows you to browse hundreds of themes that can be downloaded and applied to the OnePlus One with a few clicks. The Cyanogen mod theme is also fairly big on security, so the OnePlus One has advanced features in this area. For example, control over apps that can access personal data like your contacts list is easy and straightforward with Privacy Guard, and you can even enable the so-called Whisper Push service, which encrypts text messages. Lastly, blacklisting phone numbers from calling you or sending you text messages is baseline with the software. On the whole, we quite like what we're treated to here. The extra layer of functionality is minimal but somewhat liberating and does not come at the expense of speed at all. In terms of processing might, the OnePlus One is right up there with the best. Its powerful quad-core Snapdragon 801 chip makes use of 4 2.5 GHz Crate cores and an Adreno 330 GPU, both of which deliver outstanding performance. Also helpful in that regard are the 3 GB of RAM on board. As can be expected from such a configuration, the One runs whatever you throw at it with ease and finesse. Even the most graphically complicated 3D games do not strain the processor, and we're yet to see it stutter. This, as we already pointed out, extends to general UI navigation, which is done without a hitch. The OnePlus One really is a no-compromise device in this regard. As for memory, there are two versions available, both with 3 GB of RAM on board. You have the Silk White model with 16 GB of internal storage and the Sandstone Black edition we have on hand with 64 GB of storage. And before you ask, the answer is no, there is no microSD card slot to be found anywhere, unfortunately. When it comes to browsing the web, the OnePlus One relies on Google's Chrome browser, which comes preloaded. That's a good thing, seeing as Chrome has become something of a reliable benchmark as far as browsing on your mobile goes. Again, as can be expected from such a hardware configuration, page load times, rendering and navigation are all fluid and leave nothing to desire at this point. As for connectivity, the phone comes with FDD LTE coverage for bands 1, 3, 4, 7 and 17. When LTE isn't available, the phone reverts back to the now older HSPA Plus standard, meaning speeds of up to 42 megabits. Looking at the rest, we've also got support for NFC, MHL, DLNA, assisted GPS, 5 GHz Wi-Fi, Bluetooth 4.0 and USB 2.0. The OnePlus One is equipped with a 13-megapixel Sony Exmor RS sensor paired up with a dual LED flash. The unit has a wider than average f2.0 aperture and a 6-lens setup that is set to eliminate color aberration and distortion at the edges. Up at the front, you get a 5-megapixel shooter that is actually pretty good. But let's first talk about the camera software, as this is still an untested area. On the whole, the Cyanogen mod team has once again managed to strike a balance between simplicity and extra features in much the same way that they have with the rest of the One's interface. To that end, the UI is lightweight looking with minimal clutter. That said, once you open up the settings menu, you're introduced to a plethora of options, but these are well organized and easy to navigate through. Some examples include controls for ISO, exposure mode and slow shutter speeds. In terms of video, you can also switch to a different video or audio codec. Lastly, there is even an option that switches the UI around so left-handed folk can navigate it easier. Our only two complaints with the UI are that, first, the viewfinder shows a 16:9 preview, while the camera churns out snaps in a 4:3 aspect ratio. This makes it impossible to know exactly how much of what you see is going to end up in the processed image. And secondly, flipping through shooting modes is done with a vertical swipe up and down, and that can make it kind of hard to quickly get to a shooting mode that happens to be the farthest from your current one. This is made worse by the fact that effects such as sepia, mono and posterize are also on that list, taking up slots. Thankfully, you can remove those and cut the list down to the essentials and simply access the wealth of extra shooting modes and effects through the circular icon on the menu. Turning to image quality, we've gotta say that the OnePlus One delivers on the whole. Perhaps most importantly, we came across no significant deviations in terms of color reproduction. That said, occasionally we got underexposed snaps that are too dark. As for HDR snaps, these are pretty good on the whole, though highlights occasionally get some visual artifacts added to them. But in general, images have a fine look to them, detail is good, and noise, while present, is kept at acceptable levels. When indoors, the OnePlus One also does a decent job. Colors are, again, fairly accurate, though it should be noted that snaps are on the warmer side, and a few exhibit a slight pinkish hue. As for environments in complete darkness, the OnePlus One's dual LED flash configuration proved capable enough to eliminate just enough of the scene, allowing the camera to snap a fairly realistic snap. That said, don't let the addition of an extra LED flash fool you. We've seen more powerful implementations out there and without an extra lamp. As for video capture, the One is rock solid. You get the now usual flagship feature set, including ultra high definition and 4K video capture at 30 frames per second, 1080p capture, and even slow-mos that are shot at 120 FPS and 720p resolution. Thankfully, all of these produce very high quality footage. In terms of multimedia, the built-in gallery is the only essential app that OnePlus and the CyanogenMod teams felt needs direct intervention, and to that end, the app here is canned and is more modern looking. For whatever reason, however, the gallery takes about 2 seconds to open an image, and we never actually found a way to check out the expanded details of a certain picture, which is just odd. The video player, like with the stock Android Gallery app, is not standalone and is instead only available through the One's gallery. Again, oddly enough, video files won't show their name. That said, all the popular video encodings run smoothly at 1080p resolution. As for music playback, the One again relies on a stock Google solution in Play Music. The loudspeaker is potent enough to fill a small to medium-sized room with above average quality sound. The OnePlus One comes equipped with 3 microphones that work together, allowing the device to isolate even loud background noises with a high degree of success. Voice is transmitted clearly, and the other side is well aware that it's you who's talking, since tonal information isn't lost on the way. Lastly, volume strength is excellent, so definitely above average on this end of the line. As for the earpiece, things aren't as good. To start off, in order to make the best out of it, you need to keep the earpiece centered on your ear, otherwise you'll muffle it. The truth is that most of the time you will, and that means that volume output won't be very high, though it's definitely not worse than the average out there. Believe it or not, we actually kept checking up with the OnePlus One during its battery test, as it became clear in the first few hours that we have a challenger here, and the One is excellent at staying online for extended periods of time. In fact, we can confirm as much, having used the phone for a while now. Unfortunately for some, the 3100 mAh cell is embedded, so you can't remove it easily. On another related note, the OnePlus One comes with a wall charger that outputs the healthy 2.1 amperes of charge. This allows for very quick charge times, or put in numbers, 120 minutes from 0 to full. That's on par with the LG G3 and the Samsung Galaxy S5, but much better when compared with the Sony Xperia Z2 and the HTC One M8. In a world where the big league game is increasingly about rehashing designs in order to aid recognizability, the OnePlus One strikes us as a welcome distraction from the status quo. This is a fresh alternative, and mostly on account of the used materials with the back shell and the minty fresh operating system. But it's not all about the exterior. The beastly hardware, along with the software on the inside, make the One what it is just as much. The lightweight CyanogenMod OS runs very fluidly, and with some exceptions, proves to be a polished piece of software that can successfully compete with major manufacturers' custom skins. In fact, it probably has a hand up over them, at least in the eyes of those who prefer Google's light approach towards Android. As for the hardware, it really does provide no compromise performance both on and off stage, as the One offers excellent display, camera and call quality along with outstanding battery life. At that low starting price of just $299 and you've got yourself one killer device, if you can get it. Indeed, as we said in the beginning, the OnePlus One is currently sold through an invitation-only system, which means that your chances of being granted the option to buy one are pretty low. That said, OnePlus has been giving indications that it's planning on scaling up production in the coming months, though at this point we wouldn't consider this a done deal. Said otherwise, while the OnePlus One currently offers an incredible bang for your buck, it remains to be seen if that will continue to be the case going forward. Once again, this was Chris with PhoneArena, thank you for tuning in.